Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Destiny Crossroads, and we're continuing our series on American history. The early history of Virginia is a tale written in the blood and tears of English colonists and Indians alike, a saga of heroism, a picture of beautiful friendships, and a shattering tragedy. The British Empire's first colony in North America stumbled forward at every step. Had it not been for an almost fanatical stubbornness that seemed to move heaven itself, American history might have been rewritten. As early as 1587, Queen Elizabeth I issued a land patent, a charter, to Sir Walter Raleigh, authorizing him to found a nation of Englishmen in North America. Something about this sounds off, and indeed the problem lies in that very charter. The English Queen was doing what Spanish, Portuguese, French, and other European monarchs were doing, legally granting American lands to favorites. But isn't only the owner entitled to transfer land? These monarchs had never seen the Americas, knew not how vast they were. On what basis did they claim the right to dispose of an entire continent? When they drew lines and parceled out territories, did they consider that they did not own this land? When they decided to grant the Indians homeland to their subjects, did they ever ask its rightful owners? Of course, Elizabeth I gave none of this much thought. She and Sir Walter selected a tract that ran along the North American east coast from what is now South Carolina to Maine. They named it Virginia, in praise of Elizabeth, the Virgin Queen, who ascended the throne at 25 and never married. Some say the word derives from the local Indian name Wingina. Sir Walter dispatched 3 expeditions. The first 2, poorly prepared, failed to hold on in North America and had to return to England. The third, led by John White, reached Roanoke Island in the spring of 1587. Many women accompanied them, including White's daughter Eleanor Dare. The colonists, cautious and heavily fortified, feared both Spanish attacks and Indian raids. With all their attention on defenses, they forgot the simplest problem: food. Once their supplies were gone, they didn't know what to eat around them. White therefore sailed back to England to procure provisions. His men thumped their chests and promised, "Don't worry, we'll wait for your return." Just before he departed, Eleanor gave birth to a daughter named Virginia, the first English child born in North America. White had planned a quick round trip, but when he reached England the navy was preparing to fight Spain's invincible armada, and the Queen ordered that no ship was to sail. One thing after another kept the anxious White in England for 3 years. When he finally returned to Roanoke Island with supplies, he found that everyone had vanished into thin air, with no sign of what had happened. Were they alive? Dead? If alive, where were they? If dead, where were the bodies? Starvation or murder? Civil strife, or Spanish or Indian attack? White searched frantically for his daughter and granddaughter, but with a storm blowing in, the ships had to leave Roanoke. Thus the lost colony became a permanent wound for the English, a mystery unsolved to this day. Later, some reported Indians with gray eyes in the region, and guessed they might be descendants of the girl named Virginia. As for England's failure in North America, Elizabeth I could only lament. In 1603 the Queen died, and her golden age faded with her. Her successor, James I, lacked her wisdom but shared her ambition. Early in his reign he agreed with the Spanish king, England would stop funding privateers who preyed on Spanish ships, and Spain would stop attacking English settlements in North America. Fortune seemed to favor the man mocked as the cleverest fool in Europe, and under him England truly began to step onto the world stage. In 1606, the London Company, later the London Virginia Company, hereafter, the Virginia Company, was founded. It received a royal license and began recruiting colonists. Thus England's path of colonization began in the form of private individuals and joint stock companies. Like real estate developers today, they raised capital by selling shares and built independently. Ownership and profits of the colony belonged to shareholders. The colonists were company employees drawing regular wages. From the outset, English and Spanish colonies diverged. Spain colonized through military conquest, with the king exercising direct, tight control. England relied on private investment, with the crown's commercial oversight substituting for political micromanagement. So long as colonists didn't rebel, they were left to their own devices. The result, Spanish colonies learned autocracy, while English colonies learned self-government, a fundamental difference between Latin America and North America. The Virginia Company launched a blitz of promotion, proclaiming the New World a land paved with gold, and hinting there might even be a river straight to China. In England, rigid hierarchies barred commoners from the upper ranks, and crowded London seemed unable to bear its exploding population. The company's pitch was hugely attractive. For nobles, the New World meant gold; for commoners, it meant opportunity. Their destination this time was the Chesapeake Bay on the North American East Coast, still called Virginia, the area of today's Virginia and several states to its west. The land was fertile, the climate warm. Even today forests cover about 65% of the region. Imagine it 4 centuries ago. In forest-choked Virginia, crisscrossed by rivers, the waters teemed with fish, crabs, scallops, oysters. The land supported wild ducks, geese, wild turkeys, deer, raccoons, wild boar, squirrels, rabbits, and it burst with wild strawberries, grapes, and nuts. As in other parts of the Americas, Virginia was the Indians' homeland. The Indians here were called the Powhatan, named for their chief, Powhatan. A remarkable leader, he ruled dozens of tribes and thousands of people across the Chesapeake Bay region. Shrewd and capable, balancing firmness with favor, he was deeply admired and respected. On one inspection visit to the Potomac tribe, young hunters crowded around to boast of their exploits. At last a youth stood and said, "Honored chief, this morning in the woods I killed 6 muskrats. My tale may not sound as grand as the others, but most of what you just heard is bragging." Powhatan burst out laughing and rewarded the truth-teller. The Powhatan lived with men hunting and women farming, raising maize, beans, pumpkins, and squashes, and gathering nuts. In the humid heat, for much of the year people wore little clothing, covering only from the waist down with leaves, feathers, or skins. In winter they donned deerskin robes. They tattooed totems on their bodies, wore feathered headdresses, and adorned themselves with shells, beads, and other ornaments, strikingly beautiful to behold. The Powhatan priests held a prophecy: a people from the east would destroy the Powhatan realm. To break the spell, Powhatan led his warriors to wipe out the Chesapeake tribe to their east. He thought he could rest easy, unaware that farther east still, on an island nation, 3 small ships were being made ready. In December 1606, streamers flew over the Thames in London as a band of Englishmen boarded 3 merchant ships amid cheers and admiration. Organized by the Virginia Company, they would leave the estuary, cross the ocean, and write their legend on a far shore. The 3 ships carried 105 passengers, all men, more than half of them called gentlemen. And what were gentlemen? Well-bred men of impeccable manners and taste, born to high society, schooled in noble accomplishments, well-dressed, polished, and courteous. They discussed politics, attended balls, played polo, practiced fencing, and went on adventures, a colorful life. There was just one thing they had never imagined, and never learned to do: work. The gentlemen wore their finest clothes for the voyage, with a simple aim: found a colony in a new world and find gold. Exploration was their passion, and they thrilled at the miracles they were about to create. Aboard as well were their servants, hard-pressed craftsmen who had failed to make a living in England, and a number of teenage boys, mostly orphans working odd jobs on the ships. Of the 105 men, not one was a farmer, not a single man knew how to plant a field. Commanding the 3 ships was Captain Christopher Newport. Once a privateer, he was among England's finest seamen, honored by Elizabeth I. With him at the helm, even the stormy Atlantic seemed less fearsome. At his order the ships raised sail, only for contrary winds to mock them. They went out, were blown back, went out again, blown back again. For 3 months they struggled, scarcely moving at all. To their credit, not a single gentleman turned back. The more they were thwarted, the more determined they became. By late February 1607, these stubborn Englishmen at last had their way, the old world faded from sight, and they sailed into the Atlantic. In April 1607, at the loveliest season in Virginia, the 3 ships reached the mouth of Chesapeake Bay. Upon stepping onto the continent, the English raised a cross, thanking God for a safe arrival. Then Captain Newport produced a sealed box, entrusted to him by the Virginia Company with orders to open it upon landfall, and read the document inside. The paper instructed them to sail upriver, find a suitable site, and found a settlement. It also listed 6 names, including Newport's, to form a council, from which one man would be chosen governor of the colony. 5 of the 6 were gentlemen, the remaining man was no gentleman at all, in their eyes, a criminal, John Smith. And where was he? Chained in the hold. Seeing Smith's name on the company's list shocked not only the gentleman but Newport himself. Smith was trouble, accused of insulting gentlemen aboard ship. He had been locked up by order of the captain, who planned to take him back to England for judgment. Now, however, they were to release him, and work with him. So who, exactly, was this Smith? Naturally, the gentlemen would not elect him governor at this point, thus the first 2 governors of Virginia were gentlemen. Following the company's orders, they surveyed upriver and finally chose a site for the settlement, naming it Jamestown after the king and establishing the Jamestown colony. The site was almost an island, connected to the mainland by only one narrow neck. The colonists valued its defensibility and access to water, and if worst came to worst, they could sail away. But Providence played another trick. In so fertile a Virginia, they had picked a barren patch. The island produced no food, the drinking water was poor, the summers suffocating, the winters bitter. Worst of all, it swarmed with giant mosquitoes that robbed gentlemen of sleep and spread dysentery. Picture it, in the humid heat, gentlemen in ruffled shirts, fine coats, trunk hose, silk stockings, and feathered felt hats battling huge mosquitoes in the Virginia woods. Yet their stubborn mulishness flared, "Bite us to death, we won't move." And somehow, Jamestown held on. On first arrival, the colonists were stunned by Virginia's abundance. Strawberries were 4 times the size of Europe's, and the beaches were piled with giant oysters, impossibly fresh. After feasting on seafood, the gentlemen set out to look for gold. Perhaps the Virginia Company's advertising had been too convincing. They thought 2 steps would kick up an ore nugget. After 3 steps with nothing, they gave up exploring. They didn't know what work was. Each day servants waited on them, clothes and meals at the ready, as if they were on holiday. But in such harsh conditions, the servants and commoners had to build shelters and find food just to survive. They had no strength left to wait on gentlemen. Jamestown quickly slid into crisis. There were more mouths to feed than hands to work. At this point, Powhatan warriors began attacking the unwelcome strangers. The colony's first two gentlemen governors had no way to handle the gentlemen and couldn't control the situation. Worse, the Virginia Company's mismanagement set a fatal incentive: colonists drew wages but were forbidden to own land or property. Work or not, it was the same; work more or less, it was the same. Who would have any motivation? With disaster looming over Jamestown, the 28-year-old John Smith was chosen as the third governor. He immediately declared, "If you don't work, you don't eat." The gentlemen protested at once: "We'd rather starve than labor, for how could they keep face otherwise?" Smith snorted, "Then starve." 3 days later, famished gentlemen picked up tools, for the first time in their lives, and worked with everyone else. They hated Smith, but none dared challenge him. Smith led the colonists to hunt and fish for food. They wanted to farm, but no one knew how. A rude shock. Smith realized, with pain, that they had to recruit real farmers to settle here. Just then, an Indian girl arrived at Jamestown, 12 or 13, lively, lovely, and bright. Who was this girl? How did she and John Smith begin a beautiful tale still told today? What did she bring to the colonists? And what would become of Jamestown? Find out in the next story, Colors of the Wind. The little girl who came to Jamestown was an Indian princess, Pocahontas, beloved daughter of Chief Powhatan. She is far more famous than her father. In 1995, Disney's animated film Pocahontas brought the story of Pocahontas and John Smith into countless homes, and its theme song, Colors of the Wind, spread widely. Can you sing with all the voices of the mountain? Can you paint with all the colors of the wind? Perhaps it was precisely this simple question that made Smith realize the New World was not merely a land awaiting conquest. Every stone and every tree had life and spirit, held in the hands and hearts of the Indians. Pocahontas was excited by the colonists' arrival. While Powhatan and his people watched the English coolly, the girl showed boundless curiosity. She liked the white sails on the ships, the novelties the colonists brought, and even the gentlemen's awkward, mismatched attire. As her father pondered striking hard at the uninvited guests, she slipped off to Jamestown to play. Her innocence and kindness quickly endeared her to everyone. She came more and more often, not only to play but frequently bringing food. People gradually noticed that the person who truly interested her was the colony's leader, John Smith. Perhaps it was Smith's fearless boldness, or perhaps his distinct personal charisma, that inspired Pocahontas's admiration. Smith, in turn, was drawn to the girl's natural grace. She was like a fresh breeze, revealing to Smith a vivid, emotional, and spiritual Virginia. At this time, Smith was 28, Pocahontas not yet 14. Though far apart in age, the two began an extraordinary friendship. Believing that survival in Virginia required good relations with the Indians, Smith, with Pocahontas's help, began reaching out to Powhatan, trading English tools and blankets for Indian maize. A shrewd trader, Smith took no losses, yet was honest, fair, and trustworthy, quickly winning Indian respect. He not only secured urgently needed grain for the colony, but also learned their fishing and hunting methods, and even their language. He repeatedly told Powhatan that he had come in peace, but Powhatan found it hard to fully trust him, for Spaniards had previously harassed the region and clashed violently with the Indians. The bloody lesson kept Powhatan highly vigilant toward European colonists. On one occasion, when Smith came to negotiate, several Powhatan warriors seized him, drove him before Powhatan, and prepared to execute him. At the critical moment, Pocahontas threw herself over Smith, compelling her father to spare him. More than once, Powhatan and his men set traps to wipe out the colonists at a stroke, and again it was Pocahontas who warned them in advance, saving them from disaster. In this back and forth, together with Smith's eloquence, relations between Powhatan and Smith shifted from mutual suspicion to mutual regard. The Powhatans eventually embraced Smith warmly, treating him as family. The friendship between Smith and Pocahontas, and Smith's rapport with Powhatan, bought precious time for Jamestown. Meanwhile, Captain Newport brought two more groups of colonists from England. By September 1609, Jamestown had grown from its original 105 to about 500 people. Inevitably, population growth led to struggles over land. Indians held that land was shared property, people had use rights, not ownership, while the English tended to think, "What I occupy is mine," with no concept of the common. Thus conflicts began, though with Smith holding the line, things remained mostly calm. In September 1609, a gunpowder explosion gravely wounded Smith, forcing him to return to England for treatment. Before leaving, he personally checked the stores, judging them sufficient for 10 weeks. Under his agreement with Powhatan, the Indians would continue supplying grain to the colony. And there was a nearby, Hog Island. In a pinch, they could always hunt a few wild hogs. In October 1609, Smith returned to England and never again visited Virginia. He later traveled to the Puritan settlements of Plymouth and Massachusetts, and he named the region New England. After returning from Virginia, he wrote several books based on his experiences, including The History of Virginia, becoming a best-selling author. In his books he harshly criticized the conduct of the gentlemen, proclaiming that what the New World needed was workers. He told everyone that Virginia had no gold, but endless opportunity. Anyone who worked hard could grow rich. His books not only filled the English with longing and enthusiasm for Virginia, they also provided valuable experience for the Puritans who later founded colonies in the New World. Not long after Smith's departure, people told Pocahontas that he had died. She was heartbroken, and Powhatan grieved as well. He even sent men to London to inquire about Smith. Powhatan admired Smith alone and had little regard for others. As conflicts between the English and the Indians escalated, Powhatan ordered a halt to grain supplies to the colony and blockaded the region around Jamestown, making it hard even to hunt. The gentlemen relapsed. As soon as Smith left, they stopped working, and selfishly hoarded most of the food. From November 1609 to May 1610 came the colonies' starving time, the likes of which the English had never known. When the food was gone, they ate dogs, cats, rats, snakes, boots, and shoes, until there was nothing left to eat. At last, in May 1610, 2 English immigrant ships docked at Jamestown. By then the settlement was nearly a ruin. Of 500 colonists, only 60 survived, skeletal, barely breathing. Those 2 ships should have arrived earlier, but on the way a hurricane broke up the original large vessel. Fortunately, the storm struck near Bermuda. They stopped at the Bermuda Islands, built 2 small ships, and then came on to Jamestown. At sea, the passengers suffered from yellow fever, many died, their bodies cast into the Atlantic. Yet people still pressed toward Virginia with dreams of a better life. These exhausted souls stepped ashore expecting a blossoming new world, only to see hell on earth. Can you imagine their feelings? On June 7, 1610, all the colonists at Jamestown climbed aboard the 2 small ships. Farewell, Virginia. Farewell, New World. We've had enough. We're going home. Goodbye forever. The 2 ships left Jamestown, drifting downstream. Beyond the river mouth lay the Atlantic, and they longed to return to England at once. Let Jamestown go to the devil. However, they did not go far. On June 10, they ran headlong into immigrant ships led by Baron de la Warre. He was the new governor of Virginia, bringing 150 people, along with food and weapons. He persuaded the homesick colonists to turn back, and together they returned to Jamestown. Imagine, without De La Warr, without his rallying call, what would the colony's history have been? 160 years later, 3 small counties on the eastern seaboard united, sent delegates to sign the Declaration of Independence, and became an independent state. Later it was the first to ratify the U.S. Constitution, the first state. This is Delaware, named after Baron de la Warr. Of noble birth, de la Warr was an iron-fisted leader and a brutal soldier, having taken part in England's conquest of Ireland. He transplanted those policies wholesale against the Indians: burn, kill, plunder. In August 1610, he ordered an attack on a Powhatan village, provoking the First Anglo-Poathan War, 1610–1614. In that raid they burned houses and cornfields, killed more than 70, and seized the chief's wife and children. On the return downriver, they threw the children overboard and fired on them, taking delight in blowing out their brains. In Jamestown they drove a sword into the chief's wife's heart. The colonists' atrocities aroused fierce resistance from the Powhatan. Though lacking advanced weapons, they knew the terrain, using bows, spears, and various hunting methods to inflict heavy losses on the colonists. Before long, Baron de la Warr returned home due to illness, and Sir Thomas Dale succeeded him. Believing Jamestown could be safe only by occupying the surrounding areas, he led men to build outposts along the James River. In May 1611 they established Henrico, and gradually erected more proper houses, a hospital, warehouses, and a church. By the end of 1612, the war began to ease, both sides were exhausted, and peace became the common wish. In April 1613, Henrico received a visitor, Pocahontas. This time she had not come of her own will, but had been abducted. Dale held her as a hostage to coerce Powhatan. Seeing his daughter captured, Powhatan halted attacks on the colony and agreed to negotiations, which proceeded off and on for a year. During that year, Pocahontas lived in Henrico. Once the colony's benefactor, she was treated as an honored guest. They preached Christianity to her and taught her English. Soon, Pocahontas was baptized as a Christian and given the English name Rebecca. By then the former little girl was 18 or 19, in the bloom of youth. A young Englishman, John Rolfe, whose plantation stood near Henrico, quickly fell in love with the beautiful Indian princess and wrote to Governor Dale seeking permission to marry her. Dale approved, and personally escorted a large party to Powhatan's residence to conclude a peace agreement. In March 1614, peace finally arrived. A grand celebration was held, climaxing with the wedding of Pocahontas and John Rolfe. Their union was the first interracial marriage among the English and an important guarantee of peace in Virginia. Powhatan did not attend. He sent his brother and 2 sons. As his daughter left the Indian world for English society, he was likely sorrowful. In early 1615, Pocahontas bore a son, and Rolfe, the proudest of fathers, wished to take her to England. Conveniently, the Virginia Company, eager to promote the New World, invited them for a public relations tour. In 1616 they returned to England. With her unique grace, Pocahontas captivated London society, becoming a universally admired star, without question Virginia's most beautiful ambassador. At one special masquerade, the host was King James I himself. Pocahontas's exotic charm drew a rare smile from the usually gloomy monarch. Pocahontas was delighted to learn that John Smith was still alive. She eagerly hoped he would come to see her, but Smith was slow to appear. When he finally stood before her, he seemed unaccustomed to the Lady Rebecca, in full English dress, he could no longer see the little girl of the Virginia forest. The two parted almost unhappily. This farewell became their last. In March 1617, Pocahontas and Rolfe set out to return to Virginia. Before the ship even left the Thames, Pocahontas fell ill. Her husband carried her ashore and took her to a hospital. Soon after, Pocahontas died, only 22. She died of smallpox. Rolfe buried her in the town where she passed away, left their son temporarily with family to be raised, and, filled with grief, returned alone to Virginia to manage his plantation. Do not underestimate that plantation or its master. It was Rolfe who helped Virginia's colonists find gold. This special gold had broad leaves, turned golden brown when dried, and when crushed could be inhaled from a small tube. You guessed it, tobacco. Virginia's natural conditions suited tobacco, but it had long lost out to Spain's West Indies colonies because of poor varieties. At risk of the gallows, Rolfe stole seeds from the West Indies and cultivated in Virginia a sweeter strain. The new variety quickly swept England. Nobles made Virginia tobacco a fashion. From then on, the colony's economy turned from loss to profit and entered a path of prosperity. Tobacco became Virginia's cash crop, often used like money in many situations. Since tobacco meant money, meant gold, wouldn't everything be fine in Virginia if people simply planted tobacco like mad? Unfortunately, there is no free lunch. Tobacco is delicate and requires a great deal of labor. Even professional farmers lack the energy to tend too much of it. Disease, war, and hunger killed 4/5 of Virginia's initial 10,000 colonists, that is, 8,000 people, within a year of arriving in the New World, so labor was extremely expensive. The Virginia Company advertised desperately in England to lure migrants, rewarding those who brought indentured servants to North America, to the point that London kidnappers ran rampant, often abducting people in the streets to sell in the New World. Prisoners could be released if they agreed to go to North America. Even so, many preferred British prisons to Virginia. With an 80% mortality rate, wasn't that practically a death sentence? The urgent need for labor made the slave trade a natural reality. The slave trade was not invented in the New World, it had existed for thousands of years. War captives from conflicts between African tribes became slaves, and Arabs and Europeans were the first to begin intercontinental slave trading. In 1619, a Portuguese ship carrying 350 Africans seized in Angola intended to sell them in Brazil, but en route it was captured by a Dutch ship and an English ship. The two vessels split the cargo, arriving at Jamestown one after the other. The 350 Africans were immediately snapped up. At the time, they were purchased as indentured servants, to be freed when their terms expired. Gradually, colonists realized it was more profitable if those contracts never ended. Thus, slaves and slavery were born in the New World. In 1619, the first ship of women was brought to Jamestown. They came from poor European families, with no way out, taken to North America by traffickers. At the time, the male-to-female ratio in Jamestown was 8-1, you can imagine the scene of sheep among wolves. The docks were full of such transactions. Hey, buddy, want a wife? Sure. How much? How about 120 pounds of tobacco? Deal. In 1619, colonists finally won the right to own land in the New World. The Virginia Company at last realized that what people risked their lives for was precisely land. In 1619, the first Colonial Assembly appeared. Representatives made laws and regulations, beginning more than a century and a half of colonial self-government. The Virginia Assembly and the 1620 Mayflower Compact together laid, in practice and theory, the foundation for the New World's future political system. Self-rule became the most important feature of the British North American colonies, and the greatest difference from the Spanish ones. Over a century and a half later, when this self-governing system was threatened, people took up arms to defend the rights they had gained, and ultimately moved toward independence. Jamestown grew increasingly prosperous, and as the colonists expanded, conflicts with the Indians became inevitable. Peace in Virginia was challenged again. In 1618, Powhatan died, and his brother Opechancanough became leader of the Powhatan. He was shrewder and braver than his brother, and he knew the colonists would press their advantage, ultimately leaving the Indians no place to stand. In 1622, Opechancanough planned a surprise attack on Jamestown, killing 350 colonists, one-third of the total. Had a Christian Indian boy not warned the colonists, the losses would have been greater. This event is known as the massacre. The colonists responded with fury, and over the next 20 years bloodshed continued, culminating in the Second Anglo-Poathan War. By the war's end, the Indians had largely lost control of Virginia. The 1622 massacre caused King James I to lose patience completely with the Virginia Company. Since 1607, the extremely high mortality of colonists in the New World led the king to conclude that the company had failed to fulfill its charter, unable to protect English lives. He dissolved the Virginia Company and took the colony into state control. In 1624, Virginia became a royal colony, administered by a royal governor. But the colonial assembly was retained, equal in standing with the governor's council. Self-government remained the colony's primary system. For now, we must bid Virginia a temporary farewell, though its story is far from over. Too many fine vintages of history have settled here, we can only savor them little by little in the days ahead. By 1621, the Puritans had already founded the Plymouth colony in New England with help from the Indians. How are they faring now? Did those who came to the New World in pursuit of religious freedom truly create a haven of liberty here? What does the heavenly commonwealth of their dreams look like? Stay tuned for the next story, in the name of God. Okay, thanks for watching this episode. If you're interested in this video series, please subscribe so you can watch it next time. I'll also update the show regularly. See you next time, bye bye.